Welcome to More Than a Parent, a podcast exploring who we are and what we want outside of being a parent, so we can create an integrated lifestyle with impact both in and out of our homes. I'm Kaz Gaddis, and I invite you to join me to be your more, live your and.
Today, we're going to be talking to Sean Reed. He's the president and head coach at Arrowhead Coaching and Facilitation Solutions. Sean has nearly 2.5 decades of experience leading and growing high-performance organizations and helping other leaders at all levels of enterprises with that. At the heart of Sean's coaching practice is the belief that the key to finding joy, meaning, clarity, and confidence in our work is discovering for ourselves the way to work with complete integrity to the unique set of values and gifts that make us who we are. I love that. In addition to his work as a leadership coach, Sean is an Orthodox Christian deacon, an advocate for homeschooling, and host of a monthly podcast on homeschooling called Saint Amelia Podcast. So today we're going to be chatting about, we're going to be chatting about homeschooling overall, but really at the way that it is right now, us being in, don't cry, us being in the midst of this pandemic and the integration of professional and personal lives in a whole new way than any of us have ever experienced, especially on a global community level. So we're going to talk about homeschooling, some tips that he has that are really applicable to any where that you are with homeschooling, because it's more about the way that you're showing up in homeschooling and the way that you can support your kids. Anything else that you want to share? How about you look at camera and say that? Say that camera. So join us for this episode. You may want to jot some of the resources down, but I also will have that for you in the show notes. So no worries there. Thank you. I just got punched. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you, and just know that our hearts are going out with you, because we understand that this transitional time has a lot of emotions. Someone is always happy, has a lot of emotions that it can have for you and your family. And so amidst this transition that is not easy, I'm hoping that this podcast episode and the other roundups that I'm doing will help fill you with more ease that can show you what is possible for you and your family specifically. And again, realizing that, life is not necessarily, it's messy, right? Being a parent is messy. And so we talk about that on this podcast. We talk about ways that you can still get amazing things accomplished and raise amazing learners in the process. So my heart goes to you. I hope that this serves you and your family. Thank you so much for tuning in. Here's Sean. So Sean, I'm so excited to have you on this podcast today in the midst of all the transitions that we are in as a global community, especially when it comes to homeschooling. And so thank you for being on today and sharing some of you and your insight on that.
I'm delighted to be here. This is great, Kaz.
Yeah, when I saw you post about it, I'm like, okay, we need him on the show, because there's a different energy, and you and I are both from the same coaching program as far as the energy of which we're showing up to life with. And you, of course, focusing on leadership and confidence, clarity that comes in that. What would you share with us in just a perspective, potentially perspective shift, really, in us really kind of all having to homeschool right now?
Right. Well, I mean, as you know, Kaz, so in my day job, I spend a lot of time working with leaders or people who aspire to be leaders in whatever aspect of their life they want to lead in. And we spend a lot of time focused on strategies for building clarity and confidence. And as you know, the first step in that trajectory, and this applies completely to the homeschooling world too, or if we're just suddenly thrust into that homeschooling space, is to become aware of what's going on inside of us right now. What are we saying to ourselves about this situation? So for the person who's just found themselves thrust into this involuntary homeschool scenario, what are you saying to yourself right now? Are you saying, no way am I good enough for this? Are you saying, I'm overwhelmed? Are you saying, how on earth can I do any of this? I'm never going to be as good as this other person is that I know that homeschools already. What's going on inside of our minds and our hearts that we're saying to ourselves right now? So the first point is be aware of what that is, accept it, understand it, say, you know what? The fact is, if you're saying something right now, if you got a critic that's inside of you that's saying something not very helpful to you, that is totally understandable, because this state we're in is weird, right? It is understandable. But the second point is every one of us has the power to choose what thought we're having inside of us, what that word is that we're giving to ourselves, right, in any given time. We can choose that. So if we're feeling that we have something in us right now that's not very helpful, we can choose a helpful thought for ourselves. We can choose something that's going to be more edifying, that's going to be more empowering, that's going to help us and help those around us that we love in this time. So if we're saying to ourselves right now, I'm not good enough, we can, through practice, through habits, through help, we can say something like, you know what, I can be good enough, or I'm working on being good enough, or I am good enough. Any of those things, any of those mindsets, we can choose to adopt. It's not like, it's not a silver bullet. It takes effort, it takes work, it takes practice, it takes support, but we absolutely have that within our control to decide how we're going to approach each day in this new homeschooling world that we're in.
Yeah. Now, a question for you. For those of us that I'm in quite a bit of mom groups, and there is definitely some anger and frustration in there.
Sure.
When and I'm noticing it's very interesting actually. Some of it is towards teachers or the school system. And it's really interesting too to see then how teachers in the groups are responding or their energy about it. But what would you share as far as what if before we can even get to that place of like, obviously that is probably there and we're not even aware of the am I good enough to teach my child, right? Or how will I balance this all amidst all the other things that I'm doing as a parent? Maybe I have my work home with me or running my business, but what would you share with us as far as like the anger piece?
Yeah. Well, again, it's understandable that we would feel anger in a situation. All of us react to these kind of situations differently. Some of us feel really victimized and kind of wallow in self-pity. Truth be told, I'm that kind of a person. When bad things happen, I'm feeling really sorry for myself for a while. Others respond with anger. One of the things that I talk to my clients about, and it's true when I talk to homeschooling parents as well, is, first of all, how well is that working out for you? How well is that angry state working for you? The answer usually is not very well. So then, okay, so what would be a way of thinking about this that would be more helpful? And one of the ways of thinking about this that I encourage my clients to approach it with is what in this situation is within my control? Because I can't control what the teachers are doing. I can't control what the school boards are doing, what the governments are doing. I can't control even what my neighbor is doing. All I can control is what I'm doing in any given moment. I can't even control what my kids are doing, really.
Real talk. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a educational expert and a psychological expert named Dr. Philip Mamalakis, who I love, and he talks about that we're not actually even we're not even teaching our children when we're homeschooling. We're teaching our children to learn. So we're not even responsible for the outcome of what happens in this. All we can do is show up and offer what we have, and then the rest is up to our children and up to the God and up to fate and up to the whatever happens after that. All we can do is put forward what we have to offer.
I love that you shared that, because when we really sit with what you just shared, that becomes very freeing
Hmm.
and allows us to just be in a state of being as we're teaching them to learn. And then again, it's up to them. Just as we're coaches, it's kind of like we're coaching our kids into then being able to have the power to choose how they learn and what they take then from that and do with it. So
That's
that's
right.
beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tempting for us as parents to compare ourselves against unrealistic or, massive expectations of ourselves, or to compare ourselves to other people, or to measure ourselves by the way that our kids respond to these things. All of those are not healthy, quite frankly, ways to
Right.
measure ourselves. All we can really do is look at what we're doing, and if we're not happy with what we're bringing, then work on changing that. That's all we have with control.
Yeah, well, and something that you shared, and I really feel like this hit, at least it hit the nail on the head for me. I've considered homeschooling in the past. My kiddos are still younger. They're
Mm,
a 6-month old and a 2-year old. So teaching is different for them, and it's very flexible. And I'm creating what I think that that should look like. So there's
mm,
freedom for me in that. But I think that as our kids are older and we have them in more structured schooling outside of the home, and then we're like, okay, now we have to bring that in the home amidst everything else going on, it creates this dynamic of, I'm trying to think of a word for it, but this dynamic of maybe some sort of chaos, in the sense of how am I going to collide the structure that they've been given? How can I do that when I have all this? And so what you just shared is really, it's like, it's not about necessarily what it's been like, is like, how can that work? How can you teach them to learn at home? And I'm
yeah,
probably, those are my words. You can definitely add in your words, because you're like, yeah, that's not what I said at all. Uh,
yeah.
but for you to add in on that, and also too, how has that shown up for you? Because you're doing it, you've been doing it, and so how have you guys at home created that flexible structure for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are cultivating more than anything is that love of learning, and just, we're trying to create learners. Um, and that really the best way to do that, any experienced homeschooler will tell you that homeschooling is not merely about the curriculum you choose, or a particular group that you're a part of, or any particular metric that you use to associate, whether or not to measure whether or not you're being successful. All of it is homeschooling. All of what we do in our life with our with our children is homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's not a particular time of day even when we're homeschooling. um, I think the first thing would be, to if I had one piece of advice to share, would be to cultivate watchfulness. So be observant. um, as you're going through the day, try to take a moment and say, what's going on in this scenario, in this interaction I'm having with my kids right now, or this experience that we're sharing together. Even if it's like as simple right now as looking out the window and seeing a cardinal at the bird feeder or something like that, or sitting on the fence in the backyard, and share that moment with your kids. And even just a simple question in that moment, if you think of it, of like asking your kid, well, what do you notice about that cardinal right now? Or we have a lot of cardinals. I don't know if we have cardinals where you are, but
Yeah, no,
we
we
have a lot
have
of
them too.
cardinals and blue jays where we are. So what do you notice about that blue jay, or that cardinal, or whatever happens to be sitting on the fence at this moment? Even that moment, when you've asked that one question, you've actually opened up an opportunity for your child to learn. So there's all these opportunities at every moment of the day, as long as we're connected with our kids and kind of engaged with what they're going through, to create that learner's mindset for them and give them those opportunities.
That's beautiful. And I can vividly see you guys having that conversation by the window too.
Mm.
With the situation that we're in right now during this pandemic and the way that homeschooling is, it's, I mean, I'm sure maybe some parents are actually looking outside of the school system to redo that. I don't know what the details are when you're transitioning mid-year or whatnot, but for most of the parents, I've noticed that they've been given a certain portal to look into, a certain assignments to actually do. So it's not necessarily, in my limited understanding of homeschooling, it's
Mm,
not in the traditional way where you can search for the curriculum you want to bring into your home and how you want to create that. So what would some of your tips be overall with what they can do with what they're being given, and also what they can create
sure.
from what they want to have? What's worked for you guys with
Sure. Yeah, so every jurisdiction, every state, every province, I'm in Canada, every country is different. Um, they have different rules around homeschooling and around how it all works. So, you've got to first maybe spend a little time trying to understand what those guidelines are and resources that they've provided and structure that they've provided within. But I really have three main pieces of advice for anybody who's starting down this. The
that? Awesome.
first one is to set a goal, a simple goal, you know, or another way of even putting it is have a reason for why you're doing this, and something more than just like, well, I have to because
Yeah.
now but now that you're in this situation, why do you want to homeschool? Why do you want to take even a little bit of your energy and your time and invest it into your kids in this moment? And write that down, because there's going to be a moment later on, quite soon later on, where the poop is going to be hitting the fan, and you're going to need to remind yourself why you're doing this in the first place. So write it down. What's your goal? What's your reason for doing this? What's your motivation? Write it down. Have a goal. The second is keep it simple. Do not try, please, to do too much. Even if
Yeah.
you are an experienced teacher, it is not the same.
Not
Do
when it's your kids,
not,
right?
do not, it is, especially when it's not your kids, do not try and do too much. Keep it
Yeah.
simple. It's like going to the gym. It's like working out. You start on the low weights, and over time you can add to it. Keep it simple to start with. And if you get some success, fantastic. Then you can add on as you go. We spent, for us, in our first little while, the most powerful time was simply getting the kids together or one-on-one and reading with them more. It's amazing how many parents don't read with their kids.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily their fault. So many parents are extremely busy just trying to put food on the table.
Yeah. And
Um,
some of the kids, when they're not used to it either, I noticed
and,
that we read a lot with our well, our 2-year-old, but in the moments that we don't read as frequently, it takes her a while to get back into the building the patience or the tolerance, almost in a sense, for
for
the
sure.
story. I mean,
Yep.
I have a really great reading voice, so it's not that. But yeah, no, so I can understand where you're coming from too with that. So yeah.
Just take a few moments and read with your kids. Um, if you can do a little bit more than that, great. Concentrate on the three R's. If you can, reading, writing, arithmetic. But or if there's something that your kids obviously have a love for, that's another great path to go. There's not one right answer to doing that, but just keep it simple. That's the other thing. And then the third thing is try as hard as you can to connect, to stay connected, or to connect with other parents who are on the same journey that you're on. It takes you all of about 5 seconds on Google or Facebook to find
Yeah.
homeschooling communities and homeschooling communities near you. It's a very popular mode of education these days. It's not what it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago. So it's not hard to find communities, loving communities, good communities that are ready to support each other, especially now. So get connected, and lean on those people. I did say I had three things, but the other thing I was gonna say, and we talked about this before we started recording, was the data, there's a great organization called Cardus, CARDUS, that's done some research on homeschooling. And one of the points that its research has shown is that homeschooling is actually the mode of education that the research shows is most effective. It's not most effective in every category. Academics, there are other modes for that, although it's perfectly fine for academics. But when it comes to actually putting down deep roots, when it comes to our values and our spiritual beliefs, homeschooling is superb for that. So if that's an area where maybe you've been thinking, you know what, my family's spiritual life, or my family's, I really want to help my kids kind of, establish some values and some character for themselves that maybe I just haven't seen enough evidence that they're really being shaped the way I would love to see them shaped. Now is that time. Now is that opportunity for you to do that. And the way you do that is just you spend time with them and you talk to them and you look at that cardinal and you talk about other things and you talk about what they were watching on videos today, or what they were talking about amongst each other, or just engage. There's all kinds of opportunities to share in the dialogue around values and character and what really matters to us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing those resources. We'll make sure also, if you're listening in to or watching us, we'll have that in the show notes as well for you. I'm curious as to what tools or technology could you share that have helped you guys be able to have this homeschooling and also doing your other things, your more that you're doing? What tools or technology have helped you that maybe could help somebody else, even if it's for this transition time that we're in, which depending on what state you're in, I know parts of Texas where I am in Dallas, and also like states like Kansas have completely closed school until next school year. So until August.
Yep.
So what things maybe are helping you be able either to keep track of stuff or what have you?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's keep track of stuff. I mean, there's a ton of productivity tools out there. I'm not sure that we actually, in our family, that we've used productivity tools that much beyond sort of making lists and sticking them on the fridge, But
hey, that works.
but those tools are certainly available. What is amazing is if you just Google online curriculum or online homeschool, you will find many, many online programs that are really good with every kind of class that you can possibly need. I mean, there's a lot of folks in the homeschooling community who are really interested in classical learning and the classical forms of education. So there's something called the Classical Learning Research Center, or Resource Center, excuse me. And there's any number of forms. I don't want to bias people one way or the other with that, because the beauty of homeschooling is you can do it the way you want to do it. But again, we have, don't believe for a second that there aren't resources out there. Literally, I just before I came on, Googled homeschool, and it was like, you can go to homeschool.com. Actually, it's a great website. It's got a ton of, right now, it's got a great page on, that sort of sudden homeschool in the coronavirus kind of situation. It's got all kinds of resources. So homeschool.com would be a great place to start. But there's so many, and if you have a particular, interest or value set or something like that, just Google that in there, and I guarantee you'll find something that will be very helpful for you.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Sorry, I was giggling. You couldn't see because I have myself on mute. And if you're listening in, this has nothing to do with you either, but just to share, because we are integrating all the things right now. My husband was coming into the kitchen area. I'm more in our living space. And he kicked one of the toys and it was making noise the whole time. So I was like, I'm on mute, we're good. But I just thought it was very funny because, again, like whether you're homeschooling in this current moment or just parenting in general, it can be messy, right? Like, but it's still in spite of.
This reminds me of a story I should tell.
Let's do
So
it.
when we started homeschooling, we did it by choice, and we were sure we were going to be like the poster children for homeschool. We were going to be awesome, and it was going to be like no other homeschool. It was really going to be school in our house. So write down. I am embarrassed to say this, but I'll say it anyways.
I love it.
We actually had uniforms planned for our kids.
Oh, that's so
This
cute.
was going to be serious stuff.
I
And we were
love
gonna
it.
we had a special room in the house and the whole thing. Do you know how long that lasted? Like
Did it last a full day?
Not even.
Oh, wow.
Not even. The uniforms were off by lunchtime, and the room was in complete disarray. What homeschooling really looks like for 90% of families is like sprawling paper amidst like the breakfast toast that's still sitting there on the dining room kitchen table at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because you haven't had time to get to the dishes yet. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. It's this beautiful mess that somehow works.
I love it.
It really does.
And that's what life is if we allow it to be versus trying to control it. Like we talked in the original, the start of this conversation, it's this piece of surrender. And like what you shared about them, teaching them to be learners and encouraging them to see learning in everything, even from the simple conversations outside of a window, which are much more than that, right? Like how you shared with us to keep it simple. That's beautiful. So I was going to ask you at what age were the kids at that time?
Good question. They were right around like kindergarten and grade 2, I think. I want to say.
God bless
yeah.
you guys.
Yeah, we homeschooled them all the way through elementary and junior high, and middle
Oh, that's
school.
wonderful.
And it never really got any tidier than that, by the way. It just, the only thing that kept us from completely destroying our house was that we did some online programs, and maybe that got them focused for a little bit. But
Cool.
again, that, the mess, the kitchen table mess, it's inevitable. And it's one of those scenarios, again, where you can look at that and you can choose to respond to it the way you want.
Yeah.
You can choose to respond and say, this obviously shows that I am completely overwhelmed and totally out of my league.
Yeah.
Or you can say, look at that. We got this done today.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I fed my kids and taught them math today.
Yeah. You just
Amazing.
grab that
And
piece of
here's the
toast.
evidence right in front of me.
You just grab the piece of toast from under the paper and there you're like, it's truly self-serve. But
But these, we every moment, every piece of evidence around us, we have the choice to respond to it the way we want to. And that's another example.
Well, and thank you for sharing that story and being transparent with that, because I think one of the underlying, and of course my kids are at a different age range, but I can get the energy that a lot of parents are feeling right now, because we feel like it has to be a certain way because it's coming to them, it's coming mostly from their school district, and they're like, whoa, like I didn't apply to be a teacher, like how did this, but it's looking at like it doesn't have to be a certain way, of course within the parameters that are there, but then you get to make it your own. So from the time that you started homeschooling, alongside your wife, right?
Yep.
Okay.
She was really the primary, the primary educator. Although any homeschooling parent will tell you that everybody's involved in it in different ways.
Right. So what would you share when it comes to, so a lot of us are at the home, whether it's just one parent in the household or where there's two, how would you share for parents to set themselves up for success? Yes, there's a mindset piece that we shared, but is there anything that helped you two in knowing kind of like what was coming up?
Yeah, well, again, I'd say setting a goal, getting really clear about that, getting connected, extremely important. I think, and then being patient with yourself. So much of it is mindset, Kaz. Honestly, I don't think homeschooling parents need me to tell. I mean, if they do, they're welcome to email me at sean@arrowheadcoaching.ca. But and I can give them tips on that stuff. But I think what most parents that I see really struggle with is the emotional side of this, or the perception side of this, and I am telling you, it is what you want it to be. And my advice to people is to start small. And if, for next week, if homeschooling in your house is half an hour of reading time with your kids, awesome. And that, awesome. That's half an hour more of reading than they were doing before with you.
Mm.
And that could be life changing for them. You don't know.
Right.
It could be 20 years from now, I could say, you know what? I remember in the whole coronavirus schmozzle,
Yeah.
my parents read to me every day. That was powerful. In fact, that's so powerful, I'm going to make sure I read to my kids every day. I mean, we just don't know what the most powerful things are. They're probably these super small little things that we think we take for granted.
Yeah.
But I would just say to people that, probably just start with the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Focus on that. Half an hour of, reading with your kids, or half an hour if your kids are able to write, or you want to take half an hour and work on some printing or writing with them, or some creative writing exercise if they're a little older. Or actually what we did with our kids was we actually did creative writing before they could write. So my wife would actually sit down and have them tell a story, and she would write it down, or you could record it. But you're still going through the process of creatively articulating and imagining something for yourself. So, but don't, it's okay if it's just 30 minutes. If your whole homeschooling day at the outset is 30 minutes long, so be it. That's 30 minutes more than what you were given before, which is great.
Yeah, that's perfect. I really appreciate you sharing yourself and sharing what it's looked like for you guys with the homeschooling piece. And then the only other question I have that maybe can be helpful is, so amidst the homeschooling and just living life in general as a family, as a husband and wife, and then your professional life, whatever that either was at the time and how it is now, what helps integrate all the things? What have you guys found that helps integrate all the things when it comes to especially those first, that first year of you guys homeschooling amidst everything else that you were also working on? What did you guys find worked?
Yeah, you mean in terms of sort of the balance of juggling work and family and
Yeah.
homeschooling and all that? Yeah, so for most of the time when we were homeschooling, and of course we are now too, but when we started, for most of that time, I was doing I had a corporate job, working probably 9 or 10 hours a day most days, and traveling a fair bit too. So that was challenging. Now I'm actually most of the time in my home office. I'm a full-time coach now, so it's a different situation. But I think for us, it was two things. One, this is where I think there always is a, in a two parent family environment, there always is one person who's bearing the larger brunt of the homes of the kind of conventional, what we think of homeschooling portion of the job. But that does not let the other person off the hook, and so probably, what I would say is, and I don't claim that we did this perfectly, to be perfectly honest, but I would say that in addition to setting goals that are really goals that the primary educator is going to take on, set a goal or two for the supporting parent too. And that might be, if you're, if for whatever reason your work takes you away, although I don't know how that's going to apply in this scenario, but if it takes you away, even if
Well,
it
maybe
locks you away,
right.
maybe it locks you away in your home office for long periods of time. Set a goal that you work out with your spouse of how you can support that person. Just ask the question, how can I support you through this? And that might be, could you come down and have coffee with me for 15 minutes at some point in the day and just check in on me? Or could you take the kids for, 20 minutes and give me a break, let me go take a rest, you know,
Mhm.
but work out what that plan, what that goal, what that one or two things are that you're going to do every day to support your spouse in that homeschooling scenario. So that's one thing, but I think also really encouraging both of you being on the same page when it comes to um, keeping it simple. You know,
Mhm.
get an alignment around what your goal is, and that you're both committed to keeping it simple, so that when things get difficult, there isn't one person, one of the partnership isn't pulling in a direction that's counterintuitive to where you had agreed you were going to go, or where
Right.
the other one wants to go. That's where all the tension really comes down to, is when you're not aligned on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just the asking, how can I support you? That right there is so much support. I think we don't realize sometimes just the action and the true request for like, how can I show up for you as you're showing up for the kids, or how
Yeah.
can we show up together? And that really helps. I know for our home, we've done, obviously our kids are super little, but my daughter was currently, well, not currently, but she was in part-time preschool, and then at
Yep.
home we would do things with her as well. And so every out of every hour I take between 5 to 15 minutes to teach something, whether that's through arts or whatever that is, amidst everything else I'm doing. And so I have like a little kind of a flexible block of time. And then I make sure, because it's kind of cute, so my husband also works, we have a video production company, and so he's
Mhm.
normally outside the house, he does some editing in the house. And now that we're all in the house, he's seeing some of those activities, and he kind of felt left out, which I thought was very cute. So we are able to rotate those, which also allows the other person to focus on some other activity for themselves, for their business or house,
Yeah.
in that time. And so yeah, so partnering together and looking at what can that look like for your specific family situation, and looking at what you're good at. Once my daughter's older, my husband can teach her more on like maybe how to use a camera more,
Yeah.
or like whatever your own little gifts are that you can infuse into that learning experience that you're doing with them. When
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I just thought of another thing actually as you
Yeah.
were talking. Another way that we can really support our spouses or partners is actually not in directly in the homeschooling thing, but supporting them in pursuing something else that they love. So giving them, in this case, making space for them to pursue something that they love. So for my wife, she loves sewing and crocheting and making handicrafts of different sorts of
That's
things. She's
cool.
borderline obsessive about it, but which is great because all we're talking about right now is making masks. But but it's like, she loved that, and so a big part of what kept her healthy through all of our homeschooling was us creating space for her to continue to cultivate that love that she had for that hobby in that
Mm,
case.
yeah.
So another question to ask, especially for the supporting parent to ask the primary educator, is, honey, what do you love? And what space can I create for you to pursue what you love? You
Yeah.
know, and and even when we have time to do that, to kind of feed our souls with something that we love, the payoff pays off in every
Yeah.
other aspect. It spills over into every other aspect of our life. So that's another way that parents can support each other
Yeah.
in that. And even older kids, by the way, if you have teenage kids who are ready to think that way, they can offer the same thing back to parents,
Mm.
if they're ready to do that.
I love that. That's a really cool perspective shift too. Like, hey, you had them, might as well have them help, have them
Yeah,
support and do their part as well. Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah,
Well, I really appreciate just again your time in sharing your experiences and perspectives that are really powerful in helping us not just get through this time now, but look at like what can that look like after this transition that we're in, once things go into like a new normal, right? How can we continue to empower our kids and teach them and give them opportunities to be that learner? Because learning truly is fun, especially when it's things that they love to do. And yeah, just as they grow older, as we grow older with them, looking at what that can look like. So I really appreciate that. Before we let you go, how can we stay connected with you and yeah, just get more of you?
Sure. Well, you can find me in a lot of different places. I host a podcast. It's for homeschoolers. It's geared towards the Orthodox Christian community. I'm a deacon in my local church. It's called the Saint Amelia podcast, but you'll find on those podcasts, there will be some spiritual content that you may or may not be aligned with, but there's also a lot of practical content, especially right now that we're talking about, that would be very useful. So that's one way. The other way is I do run a leadership coaching business called Arrowhead Coaching and Facilitation Solutions. You can find me on Facebook or on the web at arrowheadcoaching.ca. And my email address, if anybody has questions, is sean@arrowheadcoaching.ca.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to link all of that into the show notes as well. Sean, thank you so much for your time and helping us get a little bit more feeling of sanity as we're homeschooling for many of us the first time, and also showing us ways that we can just like live that in the everyday. We really appreciate you.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, Kaz.
Thanks for listening to this episode of More Than a Parent. To be your more, live your and.
Continue the conversation and connect at facebook.com/groups/more than a parent.